Two 8-year-old twins huddled together in the pouring rain at an abandoned bus stop. Their clothes were soaked through, but they clutched a small backpack like it held their entire world. Inside wasn't toys or snacks, but a sealed envelope and a diamond bracelet that caught the streetlight even in the storm. Mommy said she'd come back, the little girl whispered to her brother, blue eyes searching the empty road. They didn't know that the woman who had just abandoned them was sitting in a black Bentley 3 blocks away, tears streaming down her face as she stared at a newspaper with her own photo on the front page. The headline read, "Tech CEO Victoria Sterling faces federal charges." Marcus Rodriguez had been fixing bicycles in the same corner shop for 15 years. His hands were permanently stained with grease. His back ached from hunching over handlebars, but his smile never faltered when his 12-year-old daughter Sarah ran through the door after school. Their apartment above the shop was barely 400 square feet, with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that only worked when you kicked it just right. But it was filled with laughter, homemade meals, and the kind of love that money couldn't buy. Every morning at 5:30, Marcus would wake up and make Sarah's lunch. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, an apple, and a handwritten note that usually said something like, "You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." Sarah never complained about eating the same lunch every day, even though she knew her classmates had fancy bento boxes and organic everything. "Dad's sandwiches taste like love," she would tell anyone who asked, which always made Marcus's chest tighten with pride and worry in equal measure. The bike shop barely brought in enough to cover rent and groceries, but Marcus had turned down 3 higher-paying jobs in the suburbs because they would mean longer hours away from Sarah. After losing his wife Maria to cancer 5 years ago, he had made a promise to never let work come before his daughter. Some nights, when Sarah was asleep and the bills were spread across their tiny kitchen table, Marcus would wonder if he was being selfish. Maybe Sarah deserved more than what he could provide. But then she would wake up from a nightmare and crawl into his bed, and he would remember that some things were more valuable than financial security. That Thursday evening, a sudden thunderstorm caught everyone off guard. Marcus was pulling down the metal grate over his shop window when he heard crying coming from the direction of the old bus stop. He grabbed his raincoat and ran toward the sound, his heart already racing with concern. What he found made him stop in his tracks. 2 children, a boy and a girl who looked identical except for the length of their hair, were pressed against each other under the broken shelter. They were shivering violently, their expensive-looking clothes completely soaked through. "Hey there," Marcus said gently, crouching down to their level. "What are you kids doing out here all alone?" The little girl looked up at him with eyes the color of summer sky, so striking they almost didn't look real. "We're waiting for our mommy," she said in a voice that carried just the hint of a British accent. "She said to wait right here, and she'd come back for us." Marcus looked around the empty street, rain bouncing off the cracked pavement. No car, no adult in sight. Just these 2 terrified children who couldn't have been older than 8. "Where's your daddy?" Marcus asked, taking off his raincoat and wrapping it around both kids. The little boy spoke up for the first time. "Daddy's on a business trip. He's been gone for a really long time." There was something off about the whole situation. The children's clothes were clearly expensive, their shoes were leather, and the little girl was wearing what looked like a real pearl necklace. But they were abandoned at a bus stop in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives. "Come on," he said, scooping up the little girl while the boy held onto his belt. "Let's get you somewhere warm and dry." As they walked the 2 blocks to his apartment, Marcus tried to process what he was doing. He was a single father barely making ends meet, and now he was taking in 2 random children. Sarah was going to be confused, his budget was already stretched thin, and he had no idea if he was breaking any laws. But looking down at the way the little girl had immediately trusted him, the way her brother stayed close for protection, Marcus knew he couldn't have walked away. Sarah was doing homework at their kitchen table when Marcus walked in with the 2 children. Her eyes went wide, but she didn't ask questions. Instead, she immediately got up and grabbed 2 clean towels from their tiny linen closet. "I'm Sarah," she said to the newcomers with a maturity that sometimes broke Marcus's heart. "What are your names?" The little girl managed a weak smile. "I'm Emma, and this is my brother Ethan. We're twins." Sarah nodded seriously. "I can see that. Do you want some hot chocolate? My dad makes the best hot chocolate in the whole world." That night, 4 people slept in a bed meant for 2. Marcus gave up his spot and made himself a makeshift bed on the living room floor, listening to the soft breathing of 3 children who were depending on him to keep them safe. Emma and Ethan had fallen asleep quickly, exhausted from whatever ordeal had brought them to that bus stop. But Marcus lay awake for hours, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and wondering what he had gotten himself into. He didn't even know their last names. He had no way to contact their parents. And he definitely didn't have the resources to take care of 2 more children. But when morning came and he saw Emma helping Sarah set the table for breakfast, when he watched Ethan carefully fold the blankets they had used, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. These weren't just random children who needed help. They were Emma and Ethan, who said please and thank you without being reminded, who ate his scrambled eggs like they were the most delicious thing they'd ever tasted, and who looked at him like he was some kind of hero instead of just a guy who fixed bikes for a living. 3 days passed with no sign of anyone looking for Emma and Ethan. Marcus had called the police, but without last names or any real information, there wasn't much they could do. The children seemed content to stay, though Marcus noticed they both kept looking out the window as if expecting someone to appear. On the 4th day, he made another life-changing decision. He was going to enroll Emma and Ethan in Sarah's school. The problem was money. Marcus had exactly $47 in his checking account, and school supplies for 2 children would cost at least $100. He stood in the school supply aisle at the local discount store, calculator in hand, trying to figure out what the kids absolutely needed versus what they could do without. Sarah stood beside him, watching him count and recount their meager resources. "Dad," she said quietly, "I don't need new notebooks. Mine from last year still have pages left." Marcus felt his throat close up. His 12-year-old daughter was offering to sacrifice her own school supplies for 2 children she'd known for less than a week. "No, sweetheart," he managed to say. "You deserve new things too." He put everything in the cart and prayed his credit card wouldn't be declined at checkout. It went through, but just barely. Walking home with bags full of backpacks, pencils, and notebooks, Marcus realized he was going to have to find a way to make more money. Fast. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus started making phone calls. By midnight, he had lined up a part-time job working the night shift at an auto repair shop across town. It meant he would work on bikes all day, and cars all night, getting maybe 4 hours of sleep if he was lucky. But Emma and Ethan needed school clothes, and Sarah's shoes were starting to show her toes. Sometimes being a parent meant pushing your body past its limits, and Marcus had been doing that for 5 years already. The first week of this new routine nearly broke him. Marcus would close the bike shop at 6, rush home to make dinner for the kids, help with homework, and then drive across town to work until 3 in the morning. He'd come home, shower quietly, and catch a few hours of sleep before starting all over again. His hands developed new calluses, his eyes were constantly bloodshot, and he started drinking coffee by the pot just to stay upright. But something amazing was happening at home. Emma and Ethan were blossoming. Emma, who had been quiet and watchful those first few days, started laughing at Sarah's jokes and asking Marcus to help her with math homework. Ethan discovered Marcus's collection of old National Geographic magazines and would spend hours looking at pictures of animals and faraway places. At dinner, they would all share stories about their day, and Marcus would watch these 2 mysterious children become part of his family. There were still questions though. Lots of them. Emma spoke perfect English, but would sometimes slip into what sounded like French when she was concentrating on homework. Ethan knew things about classical music that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old to know. And both children had impeccable table manners, the kind that suggested formal training rather than casual family meals. One evening, Marcus was walking past the community center when he heard piano music drifting from the open doors. It was beautiful, complex, the kind of playing that made people stop on the sidewalk to listen. He peeked inside and nearly dropped the groceries he was carrying. Ethan was sitting at the old upright piano in the community room, his small fingers moving across the keys like he'd been playing his entire life. The piece was Chopin, Marcus was pretty sure, though he didn't know much about classical music. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus asked, when the song ended. Ethan turned around, looking almost guilty. "I don't remember," he said quietly. "I just can." Emma appeared from behind the piano bench. "Ethan's always been able to play. Mommy said he was gifted." It was the first time either child had volunteered information about their mother without being asked directly. That night, Marcus found himself studying Emma and Ethan more carefully. Their clothes were expensive, that much was obvious. The fabric was high quality, the stitching was perfect, and even their pajamas had designer labels. Emma's hair had been professionally cut, probably at a salon that charged more for a child's haircut than Marcus made in a week. Ethan's shoes were Italian leather, barely worn. These were not children from a family struggling to make ends meet. Marcus waited until all 3 kids were asleep, then carefully examined the backpack Emma and Ethan had been carrying that first night. Inside, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a piece of jewelry that made his hands shake. It was a bracelet, but not the kind of costume jewelry kids usually wore. This was real. Diamonds and sapphires set in what looked like platinum, with a weight and sparkle that even Marcus, who knew nothing about jewelry, could recognize as valuable. Underneath the bracelet was an envelope with Emma and Ethan written on the front in elegant handwriting. Marcus stared at it for a long time. Opening someone else's mail was wrong, but these children were living in his home, eating his food, and he was responsible for their safety. If there was information inside that could help him understand their situation, didn't he have an obligation to look? The letter was written on expensive stationery, the kind with a watermark that caught the light. "My dearest Emma and Ethan," it began, "Mommy has to go away for a while to keep you safe. I know you don't understand, but there are people who want to hurt our family, and I can't let them find you. The bracelet belonged to your great-grandmother. If you need money, find someone trustworthy to help you sell it. I love you both more than all the stars in the sky. I will come back for you when it's safe. Love always, Mommy." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his mind racing. This wasn't a case of child abandonment or neglect. This was a mother who was trying to protect her children from something dangerous. But protect them from what? And why had she chosen a bus stop in the poorest part of the city as a safe place to leave them? The more Marcus learned about Emma and Ethan, the more questions he had. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that went against every instinct he had about privacy and boundaries. After dropping the kids off at school, he went to the public library and started searching the internet for any news stories about missing children named Emma and Ethan. What he found made him feel like the world had tilted sideways. The headline appeared on his screen like a punch to the gut. Tech billionaire Victoria Sterling's children missing after custody dispute. The accompanying photo showed 2 children who were unmistakably Emma and Ethan, standing next to a woman with their same blonde hair and blue eyes. The article was dated 2 weeks ago, and it explained that Victoria Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Technologies, was embroiled in a bitter custody battle with her ex-husband, British businessman James Morrison. Marcus read article after article, piecing together a story that seemed almost too incredible to be true. Victoria Sterling was one of the youngest billionaires in the country, worth an estimated $3.2 billion. Her company developed artificial intelligence software for medical research, and she was considered a genius in the tech world. But her personal life had been a disaster. She'd divorced James Morrison 2 years ago after discovering he had been stealing money from their joint accounts to fund his gambling addiction. The custody battle had been vicious, with both sides making serious accusations. James claimed Victoria was an unfit mother who cared more about her company than her children. Victoria's lawyers had responded with evidence of James's gambling debts, his connections to some questionable financial dealings, and his history of emotional abuse. The case had been all over the tabloids for months, with paparazzi following Emma and Ethan to school and camping outside their home. Then, 2 weeks ago, James Morrison had picked up the children for his scheduled visitation and simply disappeared. An international manhunt was underway, with speculation that he had taken Emma and Ethan out of the country. Victoria Sterling was offering a $10 million reward for information leading to their safe return. $10 million. Marcus had to read that number several times before it sank in. But if James Morrison had kidnapped Emma and Ethan, how had they ended up alone at a bus stop? Marcus kept reading, searching for any clue that might explain how 2 of the most sought-after children in the country had ended up in his care. Finally, he found a small news item buried on the 3rd page of search results. James Morrison had been found unconscious in his hotel room 3 days ago, apparently the victim of a drug overdose. He was in critical condition at a hospital in the city, just 20 miles from where Marcus had found Emma and Ethan. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. James Morrison had kidnapped his own children, brought them to the city, and then overdosed, leaving Emma and Ethan alone and scared. Somehow, they had made their way from the hotel to the bus stop where Marcus found them. 2 8-year-old children, wandering through one of the most dangerous parts of the city with no money, no food, and no idea how to get home. Marcus felt sick thinking about what could have happened to them. But he also felt something else. A fierce protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. These weren't just random children anymore. They were Emma and Ethan, who helped Sarah set the table every morning, who ate his simple meals with gratitude, who had somehow found their way into his heart in the space of a week. The question now was what to do with this information. Victoria Sterling was undoubtedly desperate to find her children. She had resources that Marcus couldn't even imagine, the ability to give Emma and Ethan every advantage in life. But she was also a stranger to him. A billionaire who lived in a world so different from his own that they might as well be from different planets. How could he know if returning the children to her was really what was best for them? That evening, Marcus watched Emma and Ethan more carefully than ever. They seemed happy, or at least content. They laughed at Sarah's stories, helped with dishes without being asked, and fought over who got to pick the bedtime story just like normal siblings. But Marcus also noticed the way they both tensed up whenever a car backfired. How Emma would sometimes stare out the window with an expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. How Ethan would wake up in the middle of the night, calling for someone named Nanny Margaret. These were children who had been through trauma, who had experienced things no child should have to experience. They needed stability, love, and patience. They needed someone who could put their emotional needs before everything else. The question was whether their billionaire mother, dealing with a custody battle and international scandal, could provide that kind of care. Marcus made a decision that scared him more than anything he had ever done. He was going to contact Victoria Sterling directly. Not through lawyers or law enforcement, but parent to parent. He was going to tell her that her children were safe, and then he was going to have a conversation about what was really best for Emma and Ethan. Finding Victoria Sterling's contact information turned out to be easier than Marcus had expected. Her company had a website with a general email address, and after some digging, he found what looked like her personal assistant's direct line. Marcus spent an hour crafting an email that said simply, "I have information about Emma and Ethan Sterling. They are safe and well. Please call me at this number." He sent the email at 9:15 on a Friday night. His phone rang at 9:17. "This is Victoria Sterling," said a voice that sounded like it was barely holding itself together. "Do you really know where my children are?" Marcus could hear the desperation, the hope, and the fear all tangled up in those few words. This wasn't the voice of a corporate executive or a billionaire. This was the voice of a mother who had been living in hell for 2 weeks. "They're safe," Marcus said, and heard a sob on the other end of the line. "They're with me, and they're okay." For several seconds, Victoria Sterling cried openly, the sound so raw and painful that Marcus felt tears starting in his own eyes. "Are they hurt?" She finally managed to ask. "Are they scared? Do they know I've been looking for them?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "They're not hurt. They're eating well, sleeping well, going to school. They talk about you every day. They miss you." More crying, then a shaky breath. "Can I see them? Please. I can be there in 2 hours. I have a plane standing by." "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said gently, "before we do anything, I think we need to talk. Just you and me. These kids have been through something terrible, and we need to make sure we handle this right." There was a long pause. "You're right," Victoria said finally. "What do you want to know?" Marcus found himself telling this woman he'd never met about the last 2 weeks. How he'd found Emma and Ethan at the bus stop, how they'd become part of his family, how they seemed to be healing from whatever trauma they'd experienced. Victoria listened without interrupting, occasionally asking gentle questions about how the children were eating or sleeping. When Marcus finished, Victoria was quiet for a long time. "You've been taking care of my children for 2 weeks," she said finally. "You fed them, clothed them, sent them to school, loved them. And you don't even know who I am." Marcus could hear something like wonder in her voice. "Why would you do that for strangers?" "They needed help," Marcus said simply. "Any parent would have done the same thing." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "No, Mr. Rodriguez. Any decent person would have called the police immediately. You opened your home to children who weren't yours, and you've been protecting them ever since. That's not normal. That's extraordinary." They talked for 2 more hours. Victoria told Marcus about the custody battle, about her fears that James's gambling debts had put the children in danger from some very bad people, about the media circus that had made normal life impossible for Emma and Ethan. She also told him about her own childhood, growing up poor with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. "I built my company because I never wanted to feel powerless again," Victoria said. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that money can't protect you from everything. It certainly couldn't protect my children from their own father." Marcus found himself liking this woman despite everything. She was clearly brilliant and successful, but she also sounded lost and scared and very much alone. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said finally, "I think you should come here. Not with lawyers or bodyguards or a medical team. Just you. Come see your children, but let's do this slowly. They've been through enough upheaval." Victoria agreed immediately. She would fly in the next morning, and come to Marcus's apartment alone. Marcus spent the rest of the night wondering if he was making a huge mistake. What if Victoria Sterling wasn't the loving mother she seemed to be over the phone? What if she was planning to take Emma and Ethan away and disappear? What if this was all some elaborate setup? But every time doubt crept in, Marcus thought about the letter he'd found in their backpack, written by a mother who was trying to protect her children from danger. That letter hadn't been written by someone who didn't care. It had been written by someone who was willing to sacrifice everything, even her relationship with her own children, to keep them safe. The next morning, Marcus told Emma and Ethan that someone special was coming to visit them. He didn't say who, just that it was someone who loved them very much and had been looking for them. Both children seemed nervous. Emma in particular kept asking if they were in trouble or if they had to leave. "Nobody's in trouble," Marcus assured them. "And nobody's going anywhere unless that's what everyone wants." Sarah, who had figured out that something big was happening, helped keep Emma and Ethan distracted by teaching them a card game their mother had taught her. At exactly 11 o'clock, there was a soft knock on the apartment door. Marcus opened it to find a woman who looked like an older version of Emma, with the same blonde hair and blue eyes. But Victoria Sterling looked nothing like the polished executive from the photos Marcus had seen online. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of weeks without proper sleep. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said quietly. Marcus nodded and stepped aside to let her in. Victoria's eyes immediately found Emma and Ethan, who were sitting on the couch looking uncertain and a little scared. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma whispered, "Mommy?" and launched herself across the room. What happened next was the most beautiful and heartbreaking thing Marcus had ever witnessed. Victoria dropped to her knees and caught both children in her arms, all three of them crying and talking at once. "I'm sorry," Victoria kept saying. "I'm so sorry. Mommy's here now. I'm never leaving you again." Emma and Ethan clung to their mother like they were afraid she might disappear if they let go. Marcus and Sarah retreated to the kitchen to give the family some privacy, but they could hear everything. Victoria asked her children dozens of questions. Were they hurt? Were they scared? Did they have nightmares? Did they understand why she had to go away? Emma and Ethan answered in the overlapping, enthusiastic way that children do when they have too much to say all at once. "We stayed with Mr. Marcus," Ethan said proudly. "He makes really good pancakes, and he taught me how to fix a bicycle tire." Emma nodded eagerly. "And Sarah is like our big sister now. She helped me with my math homework, and she taught me how to braid friendship bracelets." Marcus heard Victoria's voice break as she said, "Mr. Marcus and Sarah sound like very special people." Then, louder, "Mr. Rodriguez? Could I speak with you for a moment?" Marcus returned to the living room to find Victoria Sterling looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've given me back my children, but more than that, you've taken care of them when I couldn't. You've kept them safe and happy and loved. They're good kids," Marcus said simply. "It was easy to love them." Victoria nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I can see that they love you too. And Sarah?" She looked around the small apartment, taking in the modest furniture, the photographs on the walls, the general sense of a home that was rich in love if not in material things. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said carefully, "I think we need to talk about what happens next." Victoria nodded, her arms still wrapped around Emma and Ethan. "I know," she said. "I know we do." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined when he first found two scared children at a bus stop. Victoria Sterling, one of the most powerful women in the business world, sat in his tiny living room and asked him for advice about how to help her children heal from their trauma. She wanted to know what Emma and Ethan liked to eat, how they slept, whether they had made friends at school. More importantly, she wanted to know what Marcus thought would be best for them. "I can give them everything," she said. "The best schools, the best doctors, every opportunity money can buy. But I can't give them what you've given them these past 2 weeks. I can't give them a normal childhood where they're safe from paparazzi and kidnapping attempts and custody battles." Marcus found himself in the surreal position of giving parenting advice to a billionaire. But as they talked, he realized that Victoria Sterling wasn't really different from him in the ways that mattered. She was a parent who loved her children and wanted what was best for them, even if what was best wasn't what was easiest. "What if we tried something different?" Victoria said finally. "What if I moved here? Not permanently, but for a while. I could rent a house nearby, somewhere Emma and Ethan could have some stability while we figure out how to move forward." Marcus was stunned. "You'd leave your company?" Victoria smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "I can run my company from anywhere. And Emma and Ethan are more important than any business deal." She looked at her children, who were listening intently to this adult conversation that would determine their future. "What do you kids think?" Victoria asked. "Would you like to stay here for a while longer? You could keep going to school with Sarah, and I could live close by so you could see me every day." Emma and Ethan looked at each other, having one of those wordless twin conversations that Marcus had learned to recognize. "Can Mr. Marcus still make us pancakes sometimes?" Emma asked seriously. Victoria laughed, a sound that was pure joy and relief. I think we can arrange that. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. And can Sarah still be our big sister? Victoria looked at Sarah, who had been quietly observing everything from the kitchen doorway. Sarah, Victoria said, would you like that? Would you like to be Emma and Ethan's big sister? Sarah's face lit up with the biggest smile Marcus had seen from her in months. Really? They can stay? Victoria nodded. If everyone agrees, yes. They can stay. What followed was the strangest and most wonderful afternoon of Marcus's life. Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, helped him make grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. She sat on his second-hand couch and listened to Sarah explain the rules of Go Fish. She admired Emma's drawings and listened to Ethan play an improvised song on Sarah's toy keyboard. As the day went on, Marcus watched Victoria transform from the polished businesswoman who had appeared in news articles to just another mom, wiping mustard off her daughter's chin and settling an argument about whose turn it was to pick the next game. This was what Emma and Ethan had been missing, he realized. Not money or luxury or prestigious schools. Just their mom, present and focused on them instead of on the crisis that had torn their family apart. That evening, after Victoria had left to find a hotel and start looking for a house to rent, Marcus tucked 3 children into bed instead of 1. Emma and Ethan were staying in the apartment for a few more days while Victoria got settled, and both of them seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight they'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Dad, Sarah said as Marcus was turning off her bedroom light, are Emma and Ethan going to be part of our family now? Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed, thinking about how to answer that question. I think, he said carefully, that families can look lots of different ways. And sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not just the ones we're born into. Sarah nodded seriously. Like how you chose me after Mom died, and I chose you back? Marcus felt his throat close up. Exactly like that. Sarah smiled. Then I choose Emma and Ethan too. And I think their mom is pretty nice, even if she is really rich. Over the next few weeks, a new kind of normal began to emerge. Victoria rented a house just 6 blocks away from Marcus's apartment, close enough that Emma and Ethan could walk back and forth easily. She enrolled them in the same school as Sarah, bought them bicycles so they could ride together, and slowly began rebuilding the relationship with her children that the chaos of the custody battle had damaged. But she also did something that surprised Marcus even more than her decision to move to their neighborhood. She offered him a job. Not charity or a pity position, but a real job working as a community liaison for her company's new initiative to provide technology education in underserved communities. I need someone who understands what kids really need, Victoria explained over coffee one morning while their children played in the park nearby. Someone who can tell the difference between what sounds good in a boardroom and what actually works in real life. The salary she offered was more than Marcus had ever imagined making, enough to move to a bigger apartment, to put money away for Sarah's college fund, to stop worrying about every grocery bill. But Marcus surprised himself by not accepting immediately. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Victoria smiled. "Take all the time you need. The offer isn't going anywhere." That night, Marcus talked it over with Sarah, Emma, and Ethan. All 3 children were enthusiastic about the idea, especially when Victoria explained that part of Marcus's job would involve traveling to schools around the country. "You could help lots of kids," Emma said seriously. "Like you helped us," Ethan nodded. "And we could come visit the schools sometimes and tell other kids that learning is fun." Sarah grinned. "Dad, you'd be like a teacher, but for whole cities instead of just one classroom." Marcus accepted the job, but with conditions. He wanted to keep the bike shop open, at least part-time, because it had been his and Maria's dream, and he wasn't ready to give it up completely. Victoria not only agreed, but offered to help him expand it into a nonprofit that would teach bike repair skills to local teenagers. Within a month, Marcus found himself living a life he never could have imagined, splitting his time between corporate meetings and grease-stained workbenches, between luxury hotels and community centers. But the best part wasn't the money, or the travel, or the sense that he was making a difference on a larger scale. The best part was coming home to a family that had grown from 2 people to 5, watching Sarah teach Emma how to braid friendship bracelets, listening to Ethan play piano while Victoria helped him with his technique, seeing the way Emma had started calling him Uncle Marcus, and meaning it. 3 months after that rainy night at the bus stop, Marcus was cleaning up after dinner when he overheard a conversation between Emma and Ethan that made him pause in the kitchen doorway. "Do you think Daddy James is going to be okay?" Emma asked her brother. James Morrison had survived his overdose and was in a rehabilitation facility, working on his gambling addiction and the underlying issues that had led to his breakdown. "Mommy says he's getting better," Ethan replied thoughtfully. And she says that sometimes grown-ups make really bad choices because they're sick, but that doesn't mean they're bad people. Emma nodded. I hope he gets better. I hope he can be happy without trying to take us away from Mommy. Marcus marveled at the wisdom and compassion of these 8-year-old children who had been through more trauma than most adults experience in a lifetime. They had every reason to be angry or bitter, but instead they were hoping for their father's recovery and working on forgiveness. That weekend, Victoria organized a barbecue in her backyard, a celebration of what she called their chosen family. Marcus brought his ancient grill and his secret marinade recipe. Sarah made her famous potato salad. Emma and Ethan picked flowers from Victoria's garden and made centerpieces for the picnic table. Neighbors stopped by, drawn by the sound of laughter and the smell of good food. Mrs. Chen from the apartment next to Marcus's shop came with homemade spring rolls. The kids from Emma and Ethan's class showed up with their parents. As the sun set and the children ran around the yard catching fireflies, Marcus found himself sitting next to Victoria on her back porch, watching their kids play together. Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't stopped that night? Victoria asked. If you had just walked past the bus stop? Marcus considered the question seriously. Sometimes, he admitted. But I don't think I could have walked past. Not once I heard them crying. Victoria nodded. I used to think that money could solve any problem. But money didn't help me find my children. Money didn't keep them safe when they needed it most. A man with $47 in his checking account did that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Sarah show Emma how to make shadow puppets on the fence with a flashlight. You know what the funny thing is? Marcus said eventually. I thought I was rescuing them. But I think maybe they rescued me too. Before Emma and Ethan, it was just me and Sarah against the world. Now it feels like we have a real family again. Victoria's smile was soft and a little sad. I know exactly what you mean. I had everything money could buy, but I had forgotten what it felt like to have a home. She paused, watching Ethan chase a firefly across the grass. Thank you, Marcus. For saving my children. For saving me. For showing us what family really means. As Marcus walked home that night, with Sarah skipping beside him and Emma and Ethan running ahead to see who could get to the apartment first, he thought about the letter he had found in their backpack, that first night. Victoria had written that she loved her children more than all the stars in the sky. Looking up at the summer constellations visible even in the city's glow, Marcus realized that love like that didn't have to be measured or compared.